First of all, I'm happy to hear that many of you support a free trade, open market system on the export and in the entire energy sector. I read your testimony, Senator Johnston, and I was thinking back about all these federal policies that you referred to, like the Fuel Use Act, the wage and price controls, and others, and the unintended consequences that came about as a result of those government policies. And so I was, and Mr. Dorgan talked about in the publication that they were involved in, he specifically said restricting international trade in fossil fuels is not an effective policy to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. And I agree with that as well. Mr. Breen, one question I did want to ask you, you talked a lot about oil policy today, and do you have a position on the export of energy from America, liquid natural gas as an example?
Sure. My position is that there may be some advantages to that. I'm in 100% in favor of the idea of a free market, a global free market in energy. My concern focuses around oil primarily because the United States is single source dependent on oil for transportation. So the good news on electrical energy production and industrial energy production is it's diversified. Natural gas is part of it. There are other renewables. In the case of transportation, 93% plus is totally dependent on oil, and so that's why I've focused on it.
But on the natural gas, did you say you do, or you don't have a position on that?
My position is that it's probably not a bad thing. I think natural gas is a great bridge fuel from a climate perspective, and certainly Russia's use of it geopolitically has been unfortunate.
Senator Johnston, you talked about, as I had said earlier, about the adverse policies of the government trying to dictate what will and will not be done. I was just curious, can you imagine any sensible way that we can actually try to restrict exports of natural gas that would be an effective government policy?
Mr. Chairman, I have thought a lot about that, and if you made me come up with a policy, I don't know what it would be. I mean, if you did it chronologically as to who first files for the permit, I think there's some 16 permits now pending. That would not make any sense because, you know, it just costs a couple of $100s, I think, to file one of these things, and it doesn't tell you who has the best application or who will be able to, you got to have a decades-long supply agreement and a decades-long offtake agreement and many billions of dollars, and that first application just doesn't tell you who's going to be able to do that. So I don't think there's a way to do it. I think it would be just as disastrous as the Federal Power Commission trying to set the price of natural gas.
Do you have an opinion on that, Senator Dorgan? Or?
Yeah, I generally agree with that. You know, we currently have in law a restriction with respect to the export of oil, as you know.
Right.
That's been there since the 1970s. And let me make a point in response to what Mr. Breen said as well. It is the case that the additional production, for example, of oil and natural gas is really good news for our country, really good news. But it's also the case that 70% of the use of oil in this country is used in transportation, and 90% of transportation fuels are oil-based. And so is that worrisome? Should we be trying to diversify? The answer to that is yes, of course we should.
Right. Thank you. You know, Mr. Bradbury, you talked about the climate change issue, which certainly is important, but I think here in America we do need to take credit for the steps that we've made to improve our environment. Our CO2 emissions are down lower than they've been in 20 years. And when you think about the immediate impact, for example, when the Russians stopped the supply of gas into the Ukraine, when they stopped the supply of gas into Bulgaria and they were without gas for 4 or 5 days. When you think about the immediate impact on the lives of people because they can't get adequate energy sources, and then you compare that to the long-term climate change issue that is out there trying to balance immediate needs versus long-term needs is something that we all, I think, struggle with. But you don't have to comment on that. My time's actually expired.